My name is Greg Powell, and I'm an engineering manager at MSD, and tonight this meeting is about the Story and Main CSO Basin. It's called our Conceptual Design meeting. So welcome, and we'll get into this presentation. What we're going to talk about tonight is why we're here for this meeting and why we're in the neighborhood with this project. What is MSD doing to reach out to the community on these major projects? We want to gather a little of information from you all here as we get your input on the project. And we're going to talk specifically about this project, its design considerations, and what we'll be doing next. We are taping this for Metro TV, so I'd ask you to silence your cell phones. And to make the presentation a little more fluid, we'll hold your questions till the end. We've given you some note cards. You can write down questions. I'll be happy. We'll stick around afterwards and answer all the questions that you might have. But if we could just refrain from interrupting during the presentation, that would be helpful. All right, so why we're here. We were back here last summer talking in general about why we're doing these CSO projects. And I've started off using an acronym, CSO. What is a CSO? It's a combined sewer overflow. Well, what's a combined sewer? We went through this last summer. It's just basically prior to 1958, when the first water quality treatment center was built, when it rained, sewage and rainwater would go into a body of water, a stream, a creek, the Ohio River. After 1958, those lines were connected to Morris Foreman Water Quality Treatment Center. So on dry days, all the sewage went to the treatment plant for treatment. But when it rained, those sewers did not have the capacity, and so there were weirs or dams built in those outfall structures so that when it rained, when the system was overwhelmed, there would still be overflow going into a body of water, and that overflow, of course, would be rainwater and sewage combined. So when we talk about sewer overflows, it's not just located in Butchertown. All those dots represent locations in the sewer system where untreated sanitary sewer leaves the system. The purple dots are in the combined sewer system. The green or yellow dots are in the separate sanitary sewer system. So you can see it's a community-wide problem that we're addressing. So how are these overflows controlled? What's MSD doing about this, or what can we do about it? We talked about this last summer, and it's also available on our website, last year's presentation. You can keep the rainwater from getting into the sewer in the first place. You do that by green infrastructure projects, downspout disconnections. There are many downspouts in town that are connected to the sanitary sewer. Those need to be discharged to the ground around your house. Sump pumps are illegally connected to the sanitary sewer. They need to be discharged, again, outside your house on the ground. Or sewer rehabilitation projects. Those are sanitary sewers that are not sound, and so groundwater, when it rains, gets into that sewer system and overwhelms it. Then there's also gray infrastructure projects. Those would be pipeline projects, pump station expansions, wastewater treatment plant expansions to handle the increased flow, and storage basins, which is what we've been talking about. We talk about tonight at Story and Main, and also if you've been out to any of our other public presentations on other basins throughout the city. And you can see that the large squares are where there are basins planned or already under construction. So there's a number of them. They're located relatively close to where the combined sewer overflows occur. If we didn't locate them close, then we'd be spending millions of dollars conveying the wastewater and the stormwater to the basin. So we need to locate them close. It saves money. But you can see they're all the way from the west part of the city to the eastern part of the city and downtown. We're in the midst of about a 15-year, 20-year program to address these issues. We're in that 2017 where we're addressing the combined sewer system projects. That's where a lot of these basins, by 2020, we'll have about $400 million worth of these basins constructed. So that's what we're talking about tonight, and the Story and Main Basin is in the combined sewer system. Let's talk a minute about MSD's public outreach process. On the larger projects, we've instigated a process of 4 public meetings, an orientation meeting we call, where we come and provide background about what is the whole program, what are we trying to address in the community, what's the citizen role, understand what we can do. And if you recall from last year, we talked about when it's raining, you might refrain from using a dishwasher, washing clothes, keep extra water out of the sewer system while it's being overwhelmed by rain. And then the next phase is, well, let me talk about this one. At the orientation meeting on this project, we held it last year, June 16th, we discussed some of those things, the causes of overflows, what we can do, what MSD is doing, and that presentation is available on our Project Win website. If you go to our website, you can find that. So we're back this time for the second meeting, which is our conceptual design meeting, and we'll be presenting some conceptual designs about this particular basin. We'll present those options, and we'll gather some information from you with some ideas, some input about this particular project. We're going to take that information, we'll come back later this year, probably mid-summer, early summer, and we'll come back, we'll have taken those ideas that we garnered tonight, we'll come back with an advanced design meeting, public meeting. We'll present those design options that we've been able to address from input tonight, and we'll also take some final ideas and preferences at that time based on that conceptual design. And then finally, we will then go to a bidding process and we'll be ready for construction. We will announce, we'll come back at that point. It'll be our, what we call our pardon our dust meeting. We'll announce the construction, the schedule. We'll know who the contractor is. And we'll prepare, and we'll give you phone numbers of our inspector, our project manager, the contractor, so that any issues that might arise during construction, you'll have contact information and schedule. So again, we're here tonight on this particular basin to talk about the conceptual design, and we'll be ready to come back and talk to you about these concepts that we're going to talk about tonight and develop this summer. So first off, did everybody get a clicker? We're going to go through this process real quickly. These are simple to use. It's anonymous. We don't know who you are. We didn't number these and check off who was the number that got each particular clicker. We'll all see the results at the same time, and it's an equal voice for all of us here. And there, you know, we sent out hundreds, if not thousands, of invitations to this meeting. We get a handful of people, but not everybody can come out on a night like tonight. They may have other obligations. So this presentation will be available online for several weeks. So your friends and neighbors, spouse, anybody that couldn't come tonight, if you tell them, they can go online and they can put in their input on this presentation tonight as well. And that would be msdprojectwin.org. So let's start off. We'll do a little exercise, practicing your thumb on the clicker. Who did you cheer for in Super Bowl 50? The Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, the halftime show, the commercials, or the Puppy Bowl? There's no right or wrong answer here, but let's just practice getting the clickers going. All right. Everybody get a chance to vote? I'm going to close the polling. All right. We had a lot of Denver Broncos fans. Hindsight's 20/20. I would say that too. All right. Next question. Now we'll get into some other hard questions. How young are you? So let's gather some information on the crowd tonight, or if you're taking it online later. And you got to push the button pretty hard, so I don't have all the responses yet. So if you hit the button twice, it'll just take the last number that you hit. So, all right. So we've identified here tonight what age group is predominant. Gender, male or female? We'll have some questions later that require much more thought than this, I promise you. All right. We've got 3 responses. I know we have more than that people here. All right. I'm going to close the polling. All right. I think that looks about right. We have more men here than women. All right. How long have you lived in the Butchertown neighborhood? Less than 5 years, 5 to 9 years, 10 to 19 years, over 20 years, or I live outside of Butchertown? All right. Looks like everybody's voted. All right. We have a lot of visitors here. All right. Now we're going to ask some questions about where do you live? So kind of pay attention to this map. I'll describe these boundaries if you can't see it. Area 1, the boundary is North Story Avenue, west of I-64 and north of the railroad. Area 2 is north of East Market Street, southwest of the railroad, east of North Hancock Street. And then Area 3 is north of Lexington Road and east of Baxter Avenue. And then Area 4 would be everything outside that. So just remember those areas. Identify yourself where you live. All right, now the polling's open. Go ahead and vote now. Need about 3 more responses, so hit the button again if you don't mind. All right, thank you. Where do you work or spend your days? So it's the same geographic areas, but identify where you spend most of your days. All right, I'm going to close the polling. Thank you. Where do you operate a business? And one of your answers might be, I don't operate a business. There we go. So where of those areas do you own or do you work? Well, that says work or operate. Is operate a business, I think was it? Operate a business. Answer it that way. All right. All right. That's some of the demographic information. Now, while we're all here, let's get into the Story and Main project itself. As we showed a slide earlier, there are basins throughout the county, depending on where the CSOs are. We're looking at that area in the red circle. That's the Story and Main Basin. It's not an isolated issue. It's throughout the area. Again, what is a CSO basin? It just provides for temporary storage for wet weather overflows that would otherwise flow directly to creeks, streams, or rivers, and it's released back into the collection system for treatment when the system capacity is available. It's just another way of saying it. It's just a dry storage basin when it's not raining. When it rains, normally that combined sewage and rainwater would go into the channel, Beargrass Channel, or to the Ohio River, or to Beargrass Creek. So during these rain events, we will collect that so it doesn't get into the body of water. Then after the rain passes and there's capacity in the sewer system, we pump that back into the sewer system so it goes to the treatment plant for treatment. So there's a lot of questions people have. Some of them are not new under the sun. What happens when the basin is full? If the basin is full and it keeps raining, then the same thing happens if it happens today. It's not any worse. It's just that it would go ahead and overflow into the stream. Will this project reduce flooding? It does increase the capacity of the combined sewer system during the wet weather events, but they're not really designed as localized flooding mitigation. What about odor? You got to think about this, and it's when it's not raining and the basin is dry, there's nothing in there to produce odor. But when it is raining, it's mostly rainwater in there, depending on the amount of rain that we've had. So it's very diluted, and it's not sitting there for a long period of time. So it's not anywhere close to what a septic tank might be. It's just rainwater and sewage is there for a short period of time until the rain event passes and we have capacity. After the rain event, the basin will be equipped to where it can flush, so anything that settled out during that period while it was gathering, that would be washed back into the sewer system. Typically, odor control is not necessary with these. There are communities across the country who have built these and spent millions of dollars on odor control, and they've never turned them on. So what we are doing is we are designing for those. We're being proactive. We're performing monitoring and testing, and then it's designed for odor control, but we're not spending that money on putting that hardware in unless it's warranted, because this is not free money. It's not money from somewhere else. It's our ratepayers' money, and that's you, me, everybody who pays a water and sewer bill. So we wouldn't want to spend $1 million that we didn't have to. We're trying to be frugal and economic with the funds. But if it is needed, then the provision is there and design's there to be added. All right, this is kind of the drainage area that feeds these two overflows. It's called Combined Sewer Overflow 62, where the northernmost star is, and Combined Sewer Overflow 20, which is right by the Starkey Pump Station, which is down on Buchanan Street. Those two CSOs overflow in what's called our typical design year, which was based on 2001, I believe. About 143 times a year, about 455 million gallons a year of rainwater and sewage would escape the sewer system and get into a body of water, in this case the Ohio River. So that's what we're addressing. We're trying to eliminate that or reduce that. This area that we're looking at, if you can see the light blue, it is in a flood area. At this time, we're going to get into the design considerations, and I'm going to introduce Kyle Guthrie, who's with HDR Engineering. It's our design firm on this project, and he's going to talk about the design progression of this project.
So just to talk, like Greg mentioned, my name is Kyle Guthrie. I'm with HDR Engineering, and we're the design firm for the Story and Main CSO Basin. Just to talk about some general site requirements and considerations is that it needs to be hydraulically connected to CSO 20 and CSO 62. That's what the overflows we're capturing there. So that's a part of it. It needs to be large enough. The basin site needed to be large enough to accommodate the actual basin itself, the physical dimensions. It needed to be close proximity to CSOs. And the reason that's important is the further away that we get from these CSOs 20 and 62 in this case, the more conveyance system that we have to install to capture and convey that overflow volume to the basin site. So that's important because if we have to install a lot of infrastructure to convey the stuff, it's more of an impact on the surrounding community as well, not just the localized site. We always want to try to avoid conflicts with existing infrastructure, buildings, same with utilities, and try to limit those as much as possible. Those are cost aspects and they can be headaches down the road. Flood protection system inside of the wall or outside of the wall. This actually, the preferred site, and we'll get into that, is outside the flood protection. We understand that inside flood protection there's limited availability. So we're looking to not try to take land that's somebody else's that's already protected at that point. And we want to minimize impacts to surrounding areas, and that's kind of all, all those things are try to minimize the impacts to the community. As Greg mentioned, this is the existing typical year diagram that he kind of went over those numbers. 143 overflows, 455 million gallons is what is produced out of a typical year from these two CSOs. But with the IOAP, which is MSD's formal response to the consent decree, they've committed to a level of control of 8 overflows per CSO, which is a reduction from 143 overflows, and overall reduction of 442 million gallons of annual average overflow volume that would make its way to the Ohio. So a pretty significant reduction. But to achieve that, you need a 8.3 million gallon basin. So that's a pretty sizable basin to capture that flow. When HDR got into it, like I've already mentioned, we kind of stepped in at the planning level had already been determined through the IOAP. And what that planning level had said was that it would be an underground covered basin with a dewatering pump station, an 8.3. And what we're showing here is exactly that. It's on the preferred location right now, an underground storage basin with a dewatering pump station. But mind you, that was at a planning level. And that's important because we'll talk about that here in a second. Just to give you an idea, here's the existing site right now, the preferred site. Here's what's on it. This is actually looking northeast from the intersection of Buchanan and Franklin Street. This is looking essentially straight north, right, just north of the flood wall in front of Copper and Kings. This is looking northwest, right at the intersection of Franklin Street and the railroad. So you can kind of see there's an existing building with some vegetation growing there, and then an asphalt parking lot essentially. So when we jumped into the design with MSD, it became pretty apparent at that planning level design there was some really large challenges that we were going to face, and it was going to make it challenging not only from a cost standpoint but from a construction standpoint and design. So, and what were those? The first one was depth. This basin would have been roughly 75 feet deep at certain locations, and anybody who knows anything about construction or design, 75 feet deep is deep, and that makes significant structural design challenges and somebody to construct something at that depth. And really the reason that's being driven so deep is CSO 20, which is where we are capturing the overflow, is already somewhere in the neighborhood of 28, 30 feet below grade. And so for an underground basin, essentially your effective storage volume is based upon your overflow level. So if we're 30 feet below grade before the overflow even occurs, we can't start storing until below that level. With the preferred site that we're looking at in an 8.3 million gallon volume basin, that pushes that depth to that level. So that's very challenging. The next is the influence of the Ohio River. We're not really that far from the Ohio River at this point. We actually are outside of flood protection right here. And normal pool of the Ohio River, somewhere in the neighborhood of 420. Ground elevation out here is about 450. So 30 feet below grade, we're going to hit a significant groundwater source. And we're not even halfway to the depth of the basin's needs. So we have another 45 feet that we'll have to go down, that we'll have to contend to pretty much an unlimited source of water. So that's a huge issue right there from a construction standpoint and how we structurally fight that. But also, 100-year flood elevation is at ground level right here. So essentially at ground level. And I'll give the best analogy I can from a design standpoint. Imagine that you're holding a balloon, okay? And you try to submerge a balloon in a bathtub of water. I mean, you're going to have to apply some force to keep it down underneath that water. It's the same principle that would take effect here with a concrete basin. You're going to have to apply significant anchoring force to keep it from wanting to lift completely out of the ground. Well, with the proximity of the river, we do not have rock, which is normally how you anchor something like that. So we would either get into large friction pilings or weight, and that's challenging at that depth to think. So it's just another hurdle we have to go over. Construction access and laydown area. As we looked at, kind of that we can go back if you want to at a later date, but you can see that footprint of the site isn't huge. It's enough to accommodate the actual size of the basin, but when you think of the depth of 75 feet, I mean, the site, it will be taken up complete with excavation. What that really makes, what that brings is the contractor is now going to have to look for adjacent properties to use as laydown and construction staging areas. So on a normal day-to-day basis, he will likely have to truck in equipment and material to perform the work for that day. So that's a lot of impact to the surrounding community right there if he has to do that. And then maintenance and access. Now MSD is not going to have to access this structure every day. That's not what they're intending to do. But they will from periodic time to time have to access to make sure that they're performing PM and equipment is operating as appropriated. But to access a structure at 75 feet in depth, that's not your normal everyday access. There's large-scale provisions for safety that have to be encountered because it's a confined space. So while that's not a direct reason, it is a hurdle that MSD has to face if you have to access the structure. So with those things in mind, what we decided to do was at a 5% level, we took the opportunity to do a feasibility analysis between an above grade and below grade option. And what we came back with were three distinct things that I think that were very important. The above grade was going to save somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15 million option, $15 million for MSD. In construction duration, and this is very conservative, so it could be far greater savings. It's 4 to 5 months shorter to build an above grade basin than a below grade basin. That means they're in and out at a much quicker pace in this area. And then one of the greatest things I think is when you're building a basin at 200 foot by 200 foot by 75 feet deep, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100,000 cubic yards of dirt. That equates to about 13,000 trucks. That's 13,000 trucks that are either going to have to go down Buchanan Street, Franklin, Cable Street, so in that neighborhood. And that doesn't even include the concrete, which could double that number there. So with an above grade basin, you're eliminating that need to dig that depth and to truck that dirt off. So understanding that those elements were in play, we've decided to move forward on a conceptual design of an above grade basin. What you're seeing here is the same plan view that we showed previously, which identified the IOAP conceptual or planning level design. This is an above grade basin that's 200 foot. Actually, that's a mistake. We'll change that. It's actually 200 foot in diameter, and then an associated influent pump station, because if it's above grade, now we are having to pump into this basin. If you think back at those pictures before, that the existing building on the site is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 feet tall, give or take. The above grade basin's tank walls would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35 feet. It could have a dome or flat roof, so there's going to be some pitch to it, but the actual width is larger, but the height isn't considerably different on there, just to keep that in mind. So we developed a conceptual rendering, and please take this with, this is a rendering for a model scale. This is not aesthetically what this potentially could look like, but we wanted to give you an idea, an understanding of what we were discussing here, other than just a generalized plan view. So what you're looking at is you're looking east along Franklin Street, and MSD's Starkey Pump Station is right there. There you see the flood wall. Copper and Kings is behind there, and Challenger's Lift is over off Cable Street. So we'll talk about some additional things from an aesthetic standpoint here in a little bit, but we wanted to give you some kind of frame of reference. So it's not uncommon for municipalities to have above-grade structures. Water systems and wastewater systems in this community and surrounding communities have been putting above grade infrastructure. HDR was actually fortunate enough to work with Lexington Fayette Urban County government on a very similar project to the story in Maine. Lexington, who is also under a consent decree similar to MSD, is choosing to handle their overflow volumes through usage of above grade storage basins. And the basin that we were part of was the Lower Cane Run Road wet weather storage basin, which, apologize for the kind of the graininess of the photo, but that's actually I-64 right there on the top of your screen, right just west of the Newtown Pike exit. So it's a pretty highly visible basin from that standpoint, and it's also located within, if you're familiar with Lexington, Lexington Trail Park, or Legacy Trail Park, I apologize. So it's not only going to be seen from the highway, it's actually going to be incorporated into a park. And while we don't have those same conditions here, we're not in a park atmosphere, and nor are we seeing this from a major interstate, right? But these are something similar that Lexington felt that they could incorporate a basin and still in this high-profile area. And instead of keeping it as a standalone structure, they decided to incorporate it as a feature of the park, actually. And what they've done is they've developed some restrooms around it, a bike spot to stop on the park trail. So they kind of embraced the actual structure and incorporated it into make it look part of the park. And that's something that we want to kind of garner from you today, is the aesthetics portion of this potential basin. Like Greg said, that they're doing these all around the country, and many people are using above grade structures to do that, to capture their wet weather overflows. And this is an example, just a simple example. This is in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, of a potential decorative concrete basin. This one is in Gainesville, Florida. You can see they've used kind of a logo emblem. They've painted with decorative concrete. This is in Knoxville, Tennessee, which Knoxville has several of these constructed down there. And they're using a brick veneer and a decorative concrete and painting it. Again in Knoxville, kind of blending it around to the atmosphere. This is Daytona. This is my personal preference. They've painted windows on to the actual basin to make it look like a structure itself. This is down in Florida, town of Davie. This is Miramar, Florida as well, which we probably won't have that look on the basin tank. But you can tell that this one's actually right in the middle of a residential area. So obviously the residents had some input on that. This is a painted one off of Pensacola. And this is in Gwinnett County, Georgia, where they've tried to blend it into the surroundings. So, and really what this is trying to identify is there's a lot of options you can do with an above grade tank. I mean, you've seen probably water tanks around the communities that have been painted or to the local towns saying, I mean, Florence is a great example, Florence y'all. But this is where we're kind of next, we're going to try to garner some of your opinions on aesthetics of this basin. So I'm going to turn it back over to Greg, and then he can talk about that.
All right. Get your clickers ready, and we'll have some input here. And again, for people who are not here, can't come tonight, you have people at home, friends and neighbors, have them go to the website. This will be up in a few days, and they can have their input. We'll garner that as well. So how important is the appearance of the basin? So we'll go ahead and go to that. Number one, unimportant, somewhat unimportant, neutral, very important. So 1 through 5 in increasing importance. All right, we can go back, but that was very important. I'm not surprised by that response. What are your preferences on the exterior? A brick veneer, a decorative concrete, emblem or logo, painted design, or some other idea? Pardon me? Oh, you can pick two. Pick two on this. So you could hit your buttons 3 times. It'll just record the last 2. All right, brick veneer and decorative concrete. And again, we'll get the responses from everybody online as well. Ideas for mural design or emblem theme. So this is the time when we will take some ideas from the audience and we'll populate this screen. So anybody have any ideas?
Is the underground concept that was presented to us at the last meeting just off the table now? I mean, is that not an option?
For the reasons we've gone through up to this conceptual point, just structurally, economically, location-wise, this is probably the way it's gonna go. So we have some opportunity to have some input on the aesthetics here. Yes, it's probably not gonna be underground.
But there was no thought to go look somewhere else. once you found out.
Well, as we said, we have to be close to the CSOs. So if we go somewhere else and we're on the dry side of the flood wall, then we're probably displacing a business or homes. Or if it's not close by, then we're spending millions of dollars on conveyance to get the overflow to that basin. So again, the economics, the location, it all comes into place. Not any one thing, it's a combination.
I understand the economics, so that it was mentioned that doing it now above ground will result in like a $15 million cost savings. Is MSD proposing to, give any of that back to the community?
Well, again, as we look at concepts, think about whether this is all money coming from ratepayers. So we could spend an extra 15 or 20 or $50 million, but everybody, the whole community's rate, everybody's rates would potentially increase as a result of that. So as we go out, these are beneficial to all of the communities and the waterways, but it wouldn't be fair to spend an extra $15 million in one particular basin and not somewhere else. And we're doing things that aren't MSD's charged at that point. We're really charged with public protection and waterway protection, not in terms of just adding other dollars to not
Sure,
spend it.
and I'm not suggesting that we spend just to spend, but this, an above-ground basin like what's being proposed has costs that are being externalized on the residents and business owners, and that's affecting us directly. And I'm wondering if there's, any proposal to sort of mitigate that in any way.
Well, again, as we've laid out, even Lexington, the neighbor to the east, is putting one in a park where it's very visible and
Sure,
people
not
are
a
going to be
residential
walking.
area, though.
Pardon me?
Not a residential area. And not
No,
an
but we
area
had
of
pictures of
businesses.
some that were in residential areas above ground, so with houses around them and all that. And this is residential and industrial
And business.
and business,
And
that's
he's-
correct.
He's got a bunch of boutiques there. I've got
Right.
a restaurant there.
Right, and as I said, we've got examples from across the country, and we can come back to this and we'll talk about it, but if we could populate this so we could take some votes, and then we'll still come back to this discussion. I'm not trying to avoid that, but let's stay on task here. So, any other ideas for this particular location? What might be good as an idea? Yes, sir.
Well, I do have a question. Is all of it above ground then?
For the water storage, yes, we're pumping from the CSOs into the basin.
So could it be sunk in the ground 25 feet, and then the other rest that is needed is above ground? So it's not as tall?
Well, when we pump into this basin, then we can have gravity flow out of it. If we have some combination, then we are pumping in and pumping out. So it makes more sense
But
to
if the-
do one or the other,
But if the main is coming in at, what, 25 feet, or
below grade.
how deep?
It's about, the CSO is about 25 to 28 feet below ground.
Okay, so if it's 25 feet or 28 feet, seems to me like it could be level with that pipe, and it could fill it up with the pump or whatever. So half of it would be below ground, half be above.
I think we'll take that under consideration. We'll talk about that when we come back. We'll look at that.
Thanks.
Can we put that as an idea for a design?
We will come back and we will talk about this. This is about the design theme or the mural theme or the emblem theme. But as far as the design concept, yes, we'll take a look at that.
I really don't mean to be argumentative, but it's a little insulting to say, let's have an open conversation about designing this thing and then tell us we can pick emblems or, paintings that we want to put on the side of an above-ground storage basin. I mean, it's not what we talked about at the last meeting. And I understand all of the reasons why maybe, we need to be looking at other options or considering alternatives, but it's not really input if all we get to have input on is, what color do we paint it and what kind of cartoon do we want on the side of it. Anyway.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. What about, so we don't have any ideas for what it could look like? Nobody's interested in that, or we can just go on. We'll go on to the next slide. So other project considerations, and we've talked about it, below ground, partially below ground.
Is there going to be parking on this site?
But we would have a place for an MSD vehicle to park there when we did preventive maintenance or something, but it's not It's not designed to be manned 24/7 or during a rain event. It's just when we need to periodically go there to.
But there wouldn't be like overflow parking for the neighborhood?
Yeah, could it be used for public access though?
Those are ideas that we need to write down. Those are
Alright.
good ideas. If things like that are beneficial to the community, that's the type of things, that's the collaborative effort that we would like to have.
Well,
and that
we
would-
we need parking for the neighborhood.
Okay. Anything else? Those are good ideas.
Is there any way to add green space to this area?
Add green space?
That's,
Right. For what we might not be occupying, if the space around it be green.
Right.
Yeah. Add green space. What else? Any other ideas?
Could we maybe add some, billboards that we could rent out and have go towards the neighborhood?
Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
See what I'm saying? So it's a way where we could maybe make some income off the site.
Is that right? Is that what you're, to advertise the neighborhood, or
Promote.
is this wayfinding,
Yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Okay.
All right. Those are all good. Anything else? All right.
Close up. Okay, I'm gonna, should we give them 2? Yeah.
Could there be some solar type panels on it to operate the pumps?
There are no bad ideas. We'll write them down. All right.
Let's make 3. Okay.
All right. So let's use the clickers on these and just punch in for 3, your top 3 considerations, just so we get an idea what your top 3 might be. If you had to pick 3, what would they be out of these 6? Everybody had a chance? And again, if you punch in 4 numbers, only the last 3 will be recorded, so if you want to redo it, you can. All right, I'm going to close the polling. Okay. All right, so where are we going from here? We'll come back in the summer. We'll talk about some of these ideas. Again, we'll stick around afterwards if you want to talk a little bit more as well. We'll come back in the summer, see what of these ideas we can incorporate. We'll present those. We'll come up with some more ideas at that time, and it's estimated that we'll be back for our pre-construction meeting back in the spring of 2017. We'll know the contractor at that time. We'll have contact information. So we will have had an interim public meeting where we know what we can do with this design. Again, construction needs to be complete by December 31st of 2020. We anticipate we can be done in the spring of 2019. And we'll be sending out advertisements to come back for this advanced design meeting this summer. So with your clickers one more time, you can vote for up to 3. How did you hear about this meeting? That's important to us. We'd like to get as many people come out as possible. So you can vote for up to 3. How did you hear about this meeting? And how would you like to hear about this meeting? You may not have heard. How you heard and how you'd like to hear might be 2 different things. So up to 3, how would you like to hear about these meetings? All right, so with the clicker method and these public meetings, how satisfied are you with this feedback method? Very satisfied, very unsatisfied to very satisfied. So for general information or emergencies, always a public service announcement, call MSD at that number. That's answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can find out about these projects at our MSD Project Win website. And then tell your friends and neighbors who aren't here tonight to go online in a few days and they can see this and they can also have their input. And thank you for your participation tonight. If anybody has any questions that you've written down on the cards, I'd be happy to entertain those. Okay, every time it rains, the road area in front of Copper and King's Distillery floods. East Washington, will this fix this problem? No, I don't think this is going to address that problem, but we can look and see what the localized drainage area is there and see if there's anything we can do, but this project won't specifically address localized flooding.
But you can have somebody look into that?
Yeah, we'll look at it.
Okay.
And I'll give you a card and you can call me in a few days and see what I found out. Do you own the site? We're negotiating on the site, so we're not currently the owner of the site. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming.